Corinne Eloise Matthews stood in the doorway of her bedroom, watching her husband of 17 years pack an overnight bag, and something in her chest tightened with a suspicion she had been trying to ignore for months. Vaughn was humming under his breath, a Miles Davis tune he always hummed when he was in a good mood, and he was being unusually meticulous about which shirts he was folding into the leather duffel. Too meticulous. Too cheerful for a man who claimed to be heading to Cleveland for a routine business conference. "You sure you don't want me to come with you?" Corinne asked, keeping her voice light and casual, even though her heart was hammering. "I could use a few days away. We could make it a little vacation." Vaughn looked up from the bag and smiled, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Baby, not you know these conferences are boring as hell. All finance talk and networking dinners. You'd hate it. Plus, didn't you say you wanted to visit your sister in Charlotte this month? Why don't you do that while I'm gone?" Corinne nodded slowly, watching his face. Vaughn Matthews was 46 years old, a senior vice president at a commercial real estate firm in Atlanta, and he was a beautiful liar. Smooth, practiced. So good at it that Corinne had spent the better part of 6 months convincing herself she was imagining things. The late nights at work, the new cologne, the way he angled his phone away from her when he was texting, the sudden interest in going to the gym 5 days a week when he had barely worked out in years. She had tried to talk herself out of her suspicions 100 times. They had 2 children, a beautiful home in Cascade Heights, a life that looked perfect from the outside. Vaughn was attentive enough. He still kissed her goodbye in the mornings. He still asked about her day. But there was a distance now, an absence in the way he looked at her, like she was a comfortable piece of furniture he appreciated, but no longer really saw. "Maybe I will go to Charlotte," Corinne said. "When do you leave?" "Flight's at 6 tomorrow morning. I'll be back Sunday night." Corinne walked over and kissed him on the cheek. "Have a safe trip." That night after Vaughn had gone to sleep, Corinne lay awake staring at the ceiling and made a decision. She was tired of wondering, tired of the knot in her stomach every time Vaughn's phone buzzed, tired of feeling like she was losing her mind. She was going to find out the truth, and she was going to do it in a way that left no room for gaslighting or excuses or explanations that made her feel crazy for even asking. She was going to test him. The next morning, Corinne drove Vaughn to the airport at 5 a.m., kissed him goodbye at the departure's curb, and watched his tall frame disappear into the terminal. Then she drove home, called her sister Janelle in Charlotte, and told her the plan. "Girl, are you serious?" Janelle's voice came through the car speakers, shocked and impressed in equal measure. "Dead serious," Corinne said. "I'm telling him I'm going to stay with you for the weekend, but I'm actually going to stay at that boutique hotel downtown, the one near our house. And I'm going to watch. I'm going to see what he does when he thinks I'm 300 miles away." "Corinne, what if you don't find anything? What if you're wrong?" "Then I'm wrong, and I'll apologize to the universe for being paranoid. But Janelle, I know I'm not wrong. I can feel it." Janelle was quiet for a moment. "Okay, do what you need to do. But please, please be safe. And call me. I don't care what time it is." Corinne spent the rest of Friday putting her plan in motion. She told their 16-year-old daughter Simone and their 13-year-old son Langston that she was going to visit Aunt Janelle for the weekend and that they would be staying with their grandmother. The kids barely looked up from their phones, teenagers fully absorbed in their own worlds. She packed a bag, loaded it into her car, and hugged her mother goodbye with promises to call when she got to Charlotte. Then she drove to the Indigo Boutique Hotel, a small, upscale place only 15 minutes from her house, and checked in under her maiden name. The room was beautiful, all clean lines and modern fixtures, but Corinne barely noticed. She sat on the edge of the bed and sent Vaughn a text. "Just got to Janelle's. Long drive, but I'm here safe. Love you." 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Then, "Glad you made it safe, baby. I'm in Cleveland. Conference starts in an hour. Talk later." Corinne stared at the message. Cleveland. Right. She opened the Find My Friends app on her phone, the one they had set up years ago so they could keep track of each other and the kids. Vaughn's location showed him at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, but his flight to Cleveland should have landed over an hour ago. She watched the little dot that represented her husband, and after a few minutes, it started moving. Not toward downtown Cleveland, toward downtown Atlanta. Her hands were shaking as she watched Vaughn's location stop at an address she didn't recognize. She copied the address and put it into Google Maps. It was a luxury high-rise apartment building in Midtown. Expensive, new construction, the kind of place where a one-bedroom cost more than most people's mortgages. Corinne sat very still, breathing slowly, trying to process what she was seeing. Then she grabbed her car keys. Now, before we go any further, if you're already hooked on Corinne's story, if you can feel the tension building, and you need to know what she found when she drove to that apartment building, then do me a favor right now. Hit that subscribe button. Here's something most people don't realize. Over 75% of the people watching Philly Folktales videos right now haven't subscribed to this channel. You watch, you get invested, you feel every emotion, and then you move on without joining our community. Don't be one of those people. Subscribe right now and become part of the Philly Folktales family. Smash that like button too, because it genuinely helps these stories reach more people who need to hear them. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Atlanta? Houston? Detroit? London? Toronto? I want to hear from all of you. Because what Corinne discovered that day and what she did about it is a story you won't forget. Corinne drove to the address in Midtown with her heart in her throat. She parked across the street from the luxury high-rise and sat in her car watching. The building had a doorman, valet parking, the works. She had no way to get inside without being noticed. She sat there for over an hour, watching people come and go, wondering what she was doing, wondering if she was losing her mind. And then she saw him. Vaughn walked out of the building at just past noon, looking relaxed and happy in jeans and a fitted black t-shirt she had never seen before. He wasn't alone. Walking beside him, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, was a woman. She was young, probably late 20s, with long braids and a body-conscious dress that showed off curves Corinne couldn't help but notice, even from across the street. The woman was laughing at something Vaughn said, and he was looking at her the way he used to look at Corinne 20 years ago. Corinne watched them get into Vaughn's car and drive away. And then she sat in her own car and cried until she couldn't breathe. Not quiet tears, loud gasping sobs that came from somewhere deep and primal. She had known. On some level, she had known for months. But knowing and seeing were two different things. When the crying finally stopped, Corinne wiped her face and made a decision. She was not going to fall apart. She was not going to confront Vaughn in some dramatic scene that he would twist around and make her feel guilty for. She was going to be smart, strategic. She was going to get her ducks in a row, and then she was going to burn his whole world down. She drove back to the hotel and spent the rest of Friday afternoon and evening making phone calls. First, she called a divorce attorney her friend had recommended, a woman named Adrienne Copeland, who had a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. Corinne left a message asking for an emergency consultation on Monday morning. Then she called a private investigator. She needed documentation, photos, evidence that couldn't be denied or explained away. The investigator, a former police detective named Calvin Rhodes, told her he could start surveillance immediately and have a preliminary report within 72 hours. Finally, Corinne did something that felt petty but also necessary. She went into her banking app and transferred half the money from their joint savings account into an account Vaughn didn't know about, one she had opened years ago and never closed. It wasn't much, maybe $30,000, but it was something, a safety net. Yeah, a way to make sure she wasn't left with nothing while lawyers sorted everything out. That night, Corinne ordered room service and sat in the hotel bed with her laptop, going through their finances. She made spreadsheets. She documented every account, every asset, every bill. She screenshotted text messages between her and Vaughn, logged his location data, made copies of everything she might need. Vaughn called around 9. "Hey baby, how's Charlotte?" Corinne's voice was steady when she answered. "It's good. Janelle and I went to dinner. How's Cleveland?" "Boring. You know how these things are. I miss you, though." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, that Corinne almost admired the skill of it. Almost. "I miss you too," she said. "I'll let you get some rest. Love you." "Love you too." Corinne hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. Then she opened the tracking app again. Vaughn's location showed him back at the Midtown apartment. He was probably in bed with that woman right now, telling her the same sweet lies he'd just told Corinne. Saturday morning, Calvin Rhodes called. Mrs. Matthews, I've been surveilling your husband since last night. I have some preliminary information and photos if you want to meet. They met at a coffee shop far from Corinne's neighborhood. Calvin was a serious man in his 50s with gray at his temples and the kind of eyes that had seen too much. He slid a manila envelope across the table. I'm sorry, he said simply. This is never easy. Corinne opened the envelope. Inside were photos. Vaughn and the woman leaving a restaurant. Vaughn and the woman walking into the apartment building, his arm around her waist. Vaughn kissing her in the parking garage, her hands in his hair, both of them looking like they couldn't wait to get upstairs. Her name is Kendra Sims, Calvin said. She's 29, works in marketing at a tech startup. They've been seeing each other for at least 7 months, based on social media posts and location data. She lives in that apartment in Midtown. Your husband pays the rent. Corinne looked up sharply. How do you know that? I checked property records and payment histories. The lease is in her name, but the rent payments come from a checking account linked to your husband's business credit card. The one he probably told you was for client entertainment. Corinne felt something cold and hard settle in her chest. 7 months. 7 months of lies, of late nights, of excuses and explanations and gaslighting. 7 months of him making her feel crazy for even wondering. What else? She asked. Calvin hesitated. There's a jewelry purchase from 3 weeks ago. $5,000 necklace from a boutique in Buckhead. Does that match anything you received? Corinne shook her head. She hadn't received jewelry from Vaughn in over a year. I'll keep surveilling, Calvin said. Get you everything you need for court. But Mrs. Matthews, if I can offer some advice, don't confront him yet. Let him think you don't know. It'll make things easier when you're ready to move. Corinne left the coffee shop and drove aimlessly for an hour, trying to process everything. She ended up at Piedmont Park, walking the trails, watching families and couples and people living their normal, uncomplicated lives. She thought about 17 years of marriage, 2 children, a home, a life built on what she had believed was love and partnership and commitment. And she thought about Vaughn, in that apartment with a woman 11 years younger than Corinne, spending money that should have been going toward their kids' college funds, or their retirement, or literally anything other than keeping a mistress in luxury while his wife drove a 7-year-old Honda and clipped coupons to stretch the grocery budget. By the time Corinne got back to the hotel Saturday evening, she had made a plan. She wasn't going to confront Vaughn this weekend. She was going to wait. She was going to let him think he'd gotten away with it. Let him think Corinne was safely in Charlotte, oblivious and trusting. And then, when she had everything she needed, when the divorce papers were drawn up and the evidence was airtight and her financial position was protected, she was going to drop the bomb. Vaughn called Saturday night around 10. Hey, baby, conference is almost over. I'll be home tomorrow night like I said. You having fun with Janelle? Yeah, it's been really good, Corinne said, and her voice didn't shake even a little. I actually think I might stay an extra day or two. Janelle's been going through some stuff, and I think she could use the company. There was the briefest pause. Then Vaughn said, Oh, okay, that's fine. Take your time. I can handle things at home. I bet you can, Corinne thought. I bet you're already texting Kendra to tell her you have a few more days. Yeah, thanks for understanding, Corinne said. I'll text you tomorrow. Love you. Love you too. Sunday morning, Corinne woke up with clarity she hadn't felt in months. She checked the tracking app. Vaughn was still at the Midtown apartment. She checked her email and saw a message from Adrian Copeland's office confirming a consultation for Monday at 9 a.m. She spent Sunday putting together a timeline. Every late night, every business trip, every time Vaughn had been distant or distracted or just a little too cheerful about going somewhere without her. She matched them against credit card statements and location data and built a picture of a double life so methodical it was almost impressive. And then she did something that surprised even herself. She got dressed in her best outfit, did her makeup, and drove to the apartment building in Midtown. She parked across the street and waited. At 2 in the afternoon, Vaughn and Kendra came out. They were dressed for brunch, both of them laughing about something, completely at ease. Corinne took out her phone and took photos. Lots of photos. Then she followed them to a restaurant in Virginia Highland, to a park where they walked hand in hand, to a movie theater in Atlantic Station. She documented everything, and with every photo, with every moment she watched her husband living a whole, separate life with another woman, Corinne felt the hurt transform into something else. Not rage exactly, something colder, more focused, a determination to make sure that when this was over, Vaughn understood exactly what he had thrown away and exactly what it was going to cost him. Monday morning, Corinne sat across from Adrienne Copeland in a downtown Atlanta law office that screamed competence and success. Adrienne was a black woman in her early 50s with silver locks and eyes that missed nothing. "Tell me everything," Adrienne said. Corinne did. She walked through the whole story, from the months of suspicion to the test trip to what she had found. She showed Adrienne the photos, the location data, the financial evidence of Vaughn paying for Kendra's apartment. When Corinne finished, Adrienne sat back in her chair and nodded slowly. "You've done good work here. This is more documentation than most clients bring me after months of discovery. The question is, what do you want?" "I want a divorce," Corinne said, "and I want him to pay for what he did." "Financially or emotionally?" "Both." Adrienne smiled, not warmly but with approval. "Then here's what we're going to do. Georgia is a no-fault divorce state, which means the affair doesn't technically matter for the divorce itself. But it absolutely matters for alimony, asset division, and custody if that becomes an issue. Your husband committed adultery and used marital funds to support his mistress. That's dissipation of marital assets, and we can use it to argue for a more favorable settlement." "How favorable?" Corinne asked. "You've been married 17 years. You gave up career opportunities to raise your children and support his career advancement. Georgia courts recognize that. We can argue for permanent alimony or a very substantial lump sum settlement. We can also go after his retirement accounts, investment portfolios, the house, everything. Hey, my goal is to make sure you walk away from this marriage financially secure." "What about the kid?" Corinne asked, her voice tight. "How old are they?" 16 and 13. "Old enough to have opinions about custody that the court will consider. How's his relationship with them?" Corinne thought about it honestly. "He's not a bad father. He's just not very present. Always working, always busy. They love him, but they're closer to me." "That works in our favor," Adrienne said. "We'll ask for primary physical custody with him having generous visitation. If he wants to fight for more, we'll be ready. But most men in his position don't actually want the day-to-day responsibility of parenting teenagers. They want the image of being a good father without the work." They spent the next 2 hours going over strategy. Adrienne explained the divorce process, the timeline, what to expect. She advised Corinne not to move out of the house, not to do anything that could be used against her later. "When do we file?" Corinne asked. "That's up to you. We could file immediately. Or we could wait a few weeks, gather more evidence, make sure everything is airtight. What do you want?" Corinne thought about Vaughn, still believing he had gotten away with it, still living his double life, still thinking Corinne was too trusting or too naive to ever find out. "I want to wait," Corinne said. "I want to catch him completely off guard." "Revenge is a dish best served cold," Adrienne said approvingly. "I like it. Let's give it 2 more weeks. In the meantime, you go home, you act normal, and you document everything. Every interaction, every expense, every moment he's supposed to be working late, but is actually with her. Can you do that?" "Yes," Corinne said, and she meant it. That afternoon, Corinne drove home to her real life. She picked up the kids from her mother's house, listened to Simone complain about her chemistry teacher, and Langston talk excitedly about basketball tryouts. She made dinner. She cleaned up. She texted Vaughn that she was heading back from Charlotte and would be home around 8. When Vaughn got home at 9:30, full of apologies about traffic and how exhausting the conference had been, Corinne kissed him hello and asked about Cleveland. She listened to his lies with a smile on her face and rage in her heart, and she did not give away a single thing. The next 2 weeks were the hardest of Corinne's life. Every morning, she woke up next to a man she now knew was a liar and a cheat. Every night she made dinner and helped with homework and maintained the fiction of their normal family life. And every moment in between she documented. She screenshotted text messages. She tracked Vaughn's location religiously. She went through credit card statements and found charges to restaurants and hotels and stores she'd never been to. She photographed receipts he left in his pockets, recorded dates and times when he claimed to be working, but was actually at Kendra's apartment. And she met with Adrian twice more, handing over folders of evidence, building an airtight case. Calvin Rhodes, the private investigator, continued his surveillance. He got photos of Vaughn and Kendra at a Buckhead restaurant on a Tuesday night when Vaughn had told Corinne he was working late. Photos of them at a resort in Savannah on a weekend when Vaughn claimed to be at a regional sales conference. Photos of Vaughn leaving Kendra's apartment building at 7 in the morning on a Thursday, just in time to go home and shower before heading to his office. Through it all, Corinne maintained perfect calm. She was pleasant, agreeable, the same wife Vaughn had been taking for granted for years, and she watched him relax into the lie, watched him believe that his life was going exactly according to plan. What Vaughn didn't know was that Corinne had also done something else. She had started rebuilding herself. She had let herself go in small ways over the years, the way married women sometimes do when they're focused on everyone else's needs. She'd stopped going to the gym regularly, stopped getting her hair done as often, stopped buying herself nice things because there was always something the kids needed, or a bill to pay, or a reason to put herself last. But now Corinne started investing in herself again. She joined a gym and started working out with a trainer 3 mornings a week. She made an appointment with a stylist who updated her look with highlights and a fresh cut. She bought herself new clothes, things that made her feel beautiful and confident. She started taking long walks in the evenings, listening to podcasts about divorce and healing and building a new life. And people noticed. Her friends commented on how good she looked. Her mother asked if something had changed. Even Simone said one morning, "Mom, you look really pretty. Did you do something different?" Vaughn noticed too, but he seemed more confused than pleased. "You look nice," he said one evening when she came downstairs in a new dress. "Where are you going?" "Book club," Corinne lied smoothly. "I told you last week." There was no book club. Corinne was meeting with Adrian to finalize the divorce papers, but Vaughn had been so checked out of their life that he had no idea what she did most evenings anyway. 2 weeks after her initial consultation with Adrian, Corinne received a text. "Papers are ready. When do you want to serve him?" Corinne thought about it. She thought about timing and impact and what would hurt Vaughn the most. Not just the divorce itself, but the way it happened, the public nature of it, and the embarrassment and exposure. She texted back, "His company's annual gala is this Saturday. 500 people, all his colleagues and clients and bosses. Can we serve him there?" There was a pause, then, "You're diabolical. I love it. I'll arrange it." The gala was Atlanta's biggest commercial real estate industry event of the year. Black tie, held at the Four Seasons, attended by everyone who mattered in Vaughn's professional world. Corinne had a dress hanging in her closet, a floor-length emerald gown she'd bought months ago. She had been planning to go as Vaughn's dutiful wife, smiling and making small talk and playing her supporting role. Now she had different plans. Saturday arrived. Corinne spent the day getting ready with a level of care she hadn't employed in years. Hair, makeup, nails, everything perfect. She put on the emerald dress and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked beautiful, strong, like a woman who knew her worth. Vaughn was already at the hotel, having gone early for pre-event meetings. Corinne drove herself and arrived just as the cocktail hour was starting. The ballroom was stunning, all chandeliers and elegant decor. Vaughn's colleagues and their spouses mingled with glasses of champagne, the air full of laughter and networking. Corinne found Vaughn near the bar, talking to his boss and a group of senior executives. He looked surprised and pleased when he saw her. "Baby, you look incredible," he said, kissing her cheek. "I'm glad you made it." "I wouldn't miss it," Corinne said, smiling. She made polite conversation with the executives, played the role she'd perfected over 17 years. And then, halfway through cocktail hour, a man in a suit approached them. "Vaughn Matthews?" "Yes?" Vaughn turned, confused. "You've been served." The man handed Vaughn a manila envelope and walked away. The conversations around them stopped. People were staring. Vaughn looked at the envelope, then at Corinne, comprehension dawning on his face. "What is this?" he asked, but his voice was already shaking. "Divorce papers," Corinne said calmly. "You should probably read them in private." Vaughn's boss looked uncomfortable. The executives were exchanging glances. The entire cocktail hour had gone silent, everyone watching this scene unfold. Vaughn grabbed Corinne's arm. "We need to talk. Now." Corinne pulled her arm free. "We can talk through our lawyers. Mine is Adrienne Copeland. Now, I'm sure you'll be hearing from her very soon." She turned and walked away, her head high, leaving Vaughn standing there with the divorce papers in his hand and 500 people watching him realize his life had just imploded. Corinne left the gala and drove to a bar where she'd arranged to meet Adrienne and Janelle. They were waiting for her with champagne. "How did it go?" Janelle asked. Corinne smiled. "Perfectly." They toasted to new beginnings, and for the first time in months, Corinne felt something that wasn't pain or anger or fear. She felt free. Vaughn called 73 times that night. Corinne didn't answer any of them. He texted. He left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to pleading. Corinne blocked his number and went to sleep in the hotel room Adrienne had helped her book, into the same boutique hotel where she'd stayed during her test trip. Sunday morning, Corinne drove to her mother's house where the kids had spent the night. She sat them down and told them, as gently as possible, that she and their father were getting divorced. Simone cried. Langston looked shocked. Both of them asked why, and Corinne said simply, "Your father and I have been having problems for a while. We tried to work through them, but we can't. This doesn't change how much we both love you. It just means we won't be married anymore." She didn't tell them about Kendra. That wasn't their burden to carry. Maybe someday, when they were older, they would ask more questions, and she would tell them more truth. But for now, she just held them and promised that everything would be okay. Monday morning, Adrienne called. Vaughn's attorney reached out. "He wants to negotiate." "Already?" Corinne was surprised. "He knows we have him. The adultery, the financial records, all of it. His attorney is smart enough to know that going to court would be a bloodbath. They want to settle. What are they offering?" "Not enough, but it's a starting point. Are you ready for this to get ugly?" "I've been ready," Corinne said. The negotiations took 3 months. Vaughn fought on almost everything. He tried to claim that the apartment he was paying for Kendra wasn't dissipation of marital assets because it was a business expense. Adrienne laughed in his attorney's face and threatened to subpoena Kendra as a witness. Vaughn backed down. He tried to argue that Corinne didn't need alimony because she was capable of working. Adrienne pointed out that Corinne had sacrificed her career to raise their children and support his advancement, and that Georgia law absolutely supported permanent alimony in cases like theirs. Vaughn backed down again. He tried to fight for 50-50 custody. Adrienne brought in the kids' school counselors, their teachers, everyone who could attest to the fact that Corinne had been the primary parent for years while Vaughn worked late and traveled constantly. Vaughn backed down a third time. Through it all, Corinne stayed strong. She went to every meeting with Adrienne. She provided every document requested. She refused to be bullied or manipulated or made to feel guilty for ending a marriage that Vaughn had already destroyed. And she started building a new life. She enrolled in an online MBA program, something she'd always wanted to do but never had time for. She reconnected with old friends she'd lost touch with over the years. She started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other women navigate divorces and domestic situations. She found purpose in helping others the way Adrienne had helped her. The final settlement came through in late January, 6 months after Corinne had served Vaughn at the gala. She got the house. She got half of Vaughn's retirement accounts and investment portfolios. She got permanent alimony of $4,000 a month. She got primary custody of both kids, with Vaughn having them every other weekend and one evening a week. It wasn't everything Adrienne had asked for, but it was fair. More importantly, it was enough for Corinne to be financially stable while she rebuilt her career and her life. Vaughn had to move out of the house. Corinne heard through mutual friends that he'd moved into Kendra's midtown apartment, the one he'd been paying for all along. She wondered how long that relationship would last now that it was no longer a secret, no longer exciting, just the mundane reality of two people living together. She didn't care enough to find out. Spring came, and with it a sense of renewal Corinne hadn't expected. She planted a garden in the backyard, something she'd always wanted to do. She redecorated the house, taking down photos of her and Vaughn, replacing them with pictures of her and the kids, her friends, her family. She made the space hers. Simone adjusted better than Corinne had feared. Oh, she was old enough to understand that sometimes marriages ended, and while she missed having both parents in the house, she seemed relieved that the tension was gone. Langston struggled more, but therapy helped, and he slowly started to understand that his parents' divorce wasn't his fault, and that both of them still loved him. One Saturday in May, almost a year after Corinne had taken her test trip, she was at the farmer's market with Janelle when she literally bumped into someone coming around a corner. "I'm so sorry," she started, then stopped. The man she'd bumped into was tall, with warm brown skin and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He was holding a bag of fresh peaches and smiling apologetically. "No, that was totally my fault," he said. "I wasn't watching where I was going." "Neither was I," Corinne said. And they both laughed. His name was Desmond Clark, and he was a professor of literature at Clark Atlanta University. They talked for 20 minutes right there in the produce section about books and teaching and the best vendors at the market. When he asked for her number, Corinne surprised herself by saying yes. They went to coffee the next week, then dinner, then a concert at Chastain Park. Desmond was thoughtful and present in ways Vaughn had never been. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He was interested in Corinne's MBA program, her volunteer work, her kids. He didn't try to rush anything, content to let the relationship develop naturally. 3 months into dating Desmond, Corinne was having dinner with Janelle and caught her sister watching her with a smile. "What?" Corinne asked. "Wow, you look happy," Janelle said. "Really happy. Not pretend happy or getting through it happy. Actually happy." Corinne thought about it. She thought about the past year, about everything she'd been through, the betrayal and the pain and the hard work of rebuilding. She thought about her life now, her career starting again, her kids thriving, Desmond's kindness and consistency, the peace she felt in her own home. "I am happy," Corinne said, and realized it was true. That summer, Corinne graduated from her MBA program. Simone and Langston came to the ceremony, along with her mother and Janelle and Desmond. They took photos afterward, Corinne in her cap and gown, beaming with pride. She got a job offer the following month, director of operations at a nonprofit that provided services to underserved communities in Atlanta. As the salary was good, the mission was meaningful, and Corinne accepted without hesitation. One evening in September, almost 18 months after the divorce was finalized, Corinne ran into Vaughn at Simone's school play. They were cordial but distant, exchanging only the necessary pleasantries about the kids. Corinne noticed that Kendra wasn't with him, and later heard through the grapevine that they'd broken up months ago. She felt nothing hearing that news. Not satisfaction, not vindication, just a mild interest the way you might feel hearing about the weather in a city you used to live in, but no longer had any connection to. Vaughn had become irrelevant to her life in every way except co-parenting, and even that was minimal and functional. He showed up for his weekends with the kids. He paid his child support and alimony on time, probably because Adrian had made it clear what would happen if he didn't, but the man who had once been the center of Corinne's world was now just someone she used to know. 2 years after the test trip, Corinne was sitting in her backyard watching the sunset when Desmond came out and sat beside her. "I've been thinking about something," he said. "What's that?" "About how brave you are. Taking that trip to test Vaughn, uncovering everything, fighting for what you deserved. A lot of people would have just stayed, accepted it, convinced themselves it was fine." Corinne thought about that. "I almost did stay. I spent months trying to talk myself out of what I knew was true. I think what changed was realizing that staying would hurt more than leaving, that living with the uncertainty and the disrespect would do more damage than the pain of divorce." "Do you regret it?" Desmond asked. "Any of it?" "I regret that it happened. I regret that Vaughn couldn't be the man I thought he was. But I don't regret leaving. That was the best decision I ever made." Desmond took her hand. "I'm glad you made it, because otherwise we wouldn't be here." They sat together as the sky turned pink and gold, and Corinne thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment, the test trip that had confirmed her worst fears, the surveillance and the documentation and the strategic planning, the divorce that had been painful but necessary, the rebuilding that had been slow but transformative. She thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, just standing in the bedroom watching Vaughn pack for a trip he was lying about, feeling that knot in her stomach and not knowing what to do about it. That woman had been scared and uncertain and desperate to avoid confrontation. The woman she was now was none of those things. She was confident, self-sufficient, clear about her worth, and unwilling to accept anything less than she deserved. 3 years after the test trip, Corinne and Desmond got married in a small ceremony in her backyard. Simone and Langston stood up with her, both of them genuinely happy for their mother. Vaughn was invited because the kids wanted him there, and he came and was polite and appropriate and left early. Corinne barely noticed. She was too busy dancing with her new husband, laughing with her friends, celebrating the life she had built from the ashes of the one that had burned down. Later that night, after the guests had left and the kids were asleep and Desmond was cleaning up, Corinne stood in the same spot in her bedroom where she'd stood 3 years earlier watching Vaughn pack. The room looked different now. The furniture was different. The photos were different. She was different. Janelle called just as Corinne was getting ready for bed. "How are you feeling?" her sister asked. "Good," Corinne said. "Really, really good. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't taken that test trip? If you just let it go and stayed?" Corinne thought about it. "I think I would have stayed for a while longer. Maybe years. But eventually the truth would have come out. It always does. And by then, I would have wasted even more time on a man who didn't value me." "You're a warrior," Janelle said. "You know that, right? You fought for yourself when it would have been easier to just accept the situation. That takes real courage." After they hung up, Corinne got ready for bed and thought about Janelle's words. She had fought, not with drama or public confrontations or angry scenes, but strategically, methodically, with evidence and planning and the help of people who knew how to win. And she had won. Not just the divorce settlement, though that had been important. She'd won her self-respect back, her autonomy, her future. The test trip hadn't just revealed Vaughn's betrayal, it had revealed Corinne's strength, her capacity to face hard truths and make hard decisions, or her ability to rebuild and reinvent and refuse to be defined by someone else's failure to appreciate her. 5 years after the test trip, Corinne was promoted to Chief Operating Officer of the nonprofit. Simone graduated high school and went off to Spelman College. Langston was thriving in high school, talking about wanting to study engineering. Desmond had published a book of poetry that was getting national attention. And Corinne, now 50 years old, looked back on the past 5 years and saw not a story of betrayal and divorce, but a story of transformation and triumph. She had taken the worst thing that had ever happened to her and turned it into a catalyst for becoming the woman she was always meant to be. She still saw Vaughn occasionally at kid events, though those were getting rarer as the children got older. He had remarried, as to someone new, and seemed content enough. Corinne felt nothing about it one way or the other. His life was his own, and hers was hers, and they barely intersected anymore. One afternoon, Corinne was having lunch with a friend who was going through a rough patch in her own marriage. The friend was describing the same feelings Corinne remembered so well. The suspicions, the gaslighting, the fear of being wrong, but deeper fear of being right. "I don't know what to do," her friend said. "I don't know how to find out the truth without making everything worse." Corinne thought about the test trip, about the choice she'd made to know for certain rather than live in uncertainty. "Sometimes," Corinne said gently, "you have to be willing to face the worst truth in order to get to the best version of your future. Staying in limbo, wondering and worrying, that's its own kind of suffering. If you need to know, find a way to know, and then be prepared to make hard decisions based on what you find out." Her friend nodded slowly. "Were you scared when you took that trip?" "Terrified," Corinne admitted, "but I was more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering and never knowing. The fear of truth is powerful, but the fear of wasting your life on a lie is worse." That conversation stayed with Corinne for days. She thought about all the women who stayed in situations that hurt them because leaving seemed too hard, too scary, too uncertain. She thought about the courage it took to face the truth and then act on it. And she thought about the gift she'd given herself by refusing to live in denial, by testing Vaughn, by finding out the truth, and by fighting for what she deserved instead of accepting whatever he was willing to give. 7 years after the test trip, Corinne's life bore almost no resemblance to the one she lived when she was married to Vaughn. She had a career she loved, a husband who cherished her, children who were thriving, financial security, peace. She had become a version of herself that would have been impossible if she'd stayed. A stronger, wiser, more confident version. A woman who knew her worth and refused to settle for less. And it had all started with a test, with a decision to know the truth, with 72 hours of watching and waiting and gathering evidence that would change everything. Corinne never regretted that test trip. It had been painful, yes, devastating in the moment, but it had also been the beginning of her real life. In the life where she was the author of her own story, rather than a supporting character in someone else's. She had told Vaughn she was going on a trip to test him, and when she secretly returned and saw what he did when he thought she was gone, she learned everything she needed to know. Not just about him, but about herself, about her capacity to face hard truths, about her strength in the face of betrayal, about her ability to rebuild and reinvent and thrive. The test trip had ended a marriage, but it had also begun a transformation. And looking back now, Corinne wouldn't change a single thing.